Hello, my name is Murray Wilkinson from Future Gen Solutions, and today I've brought in a very special guest, Andrew Weston, who's been a long-term client of ours, but also runs a very successful real estate business here in southeast Queensland. Andrew's coming this afternoon to speak to us about the Queensland land tax changes. Andrew, you've had a few questions from clients, I believe.
Yeah, we've got lots of clients that live interstate and own interstate land outside Queensland, and there's a few concerns being raised around what these new tax laws mean, and yeah, exactly how people work the new tax regime out. So I just wanted to ask a few questions today. Good. From your perspective.
Well, how about we jump into some slides that we prepared which talk about the changes to the legislation. The first thing is that the key takeouts from the change of legislation is that the land tax liability is now based on not just Queensland land, it's actually based on all Australian land holdings. And that's effective from the 1st of July 2022. So it's in place now. This means that landholders with interstate land are now actually being pushed into the higher land tax bracket because of land holdings they have interstate. It also means that essentially there's different thresholds depending on how you own the land, whether you own it either individually, personally, through a family trust, unit trust, or through a company, or through a partnership. There's different arrangements in terms of holdings, and they have different thresholds. So there is some complexity attached to it. But what I will touch on is the fact that the position itself, and I've got a worked example here, talks about a comparison pre the changes, that is up until the end of financial year. So if you owned, in this example, you had a non-exempt property in Queensland with a taxable value of $750,000, plus you had a property in Victoria as well. In this example, you can see that currently a land tax payer would pay pre the 1st of July, $8,250, but after the 1st of July, because the Victorian land now comes into play and is assessed, that tax actually increases up to $15,500, which is essentially a 46% increase. So it is significant, and that's probably interesting given the fact that they've also got penalties if you don't disclose, and disclose in a 30-day period. There's the penalties, $14,375. And I guess what it does, it actually brings in a few conclusions which we need to talk about, Andrew. The first thing is that, as we know, there's land tax in other states. So Queensland is actually double dipping because those other states will still levy their own land taxes. And the other issue that comes into play is structuring. And I think this gets to your question. Your clients have been asking you about what do they do, how do they mitigate it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, how do we work it out, and what sort of structure can mitigate the absolute amount of tax?
Yeah. The issue, of course, that you have is that the structures that have already been used to purchase the assets are already set, and to change those structures involves a disposal and a subsequent stamp duty levy, which is applied for the transfer of ownership. So that's not necessarily a good way to go. It does mean that if you are buying new properties, interstate or in Queensland, effectively you need to basically think strongly about which entity you use to buy it. Because remember, every entity has a new land tax threshold. So that's work that can be done on a case-by-case basis as to how you bought it previously and whether that structure or a new structure could be preferable to buy the new property. I think it does raise the question though, Andrew, given it's a now Australian-wide tax. If you're a Queensland investor and you own Queensland property and you're buying property in Queensland, you're really not affected, are you?
Yeah, that's one of the questions my clients will have is, if you only own land in Queensland, even if it's 10 blocks of land or 10 properties, does this actually reach out to them?
And it doesn't affect them, does it? It doesn't actually affect those Queensland buyers who are buying more property in Queensland, but it does affect Queensland buyers who are buying in other states.
Correct.
Because essentially they'll be affected, and it does affect New South Wales Victorian buyers who like to buy real estate in Queensland because they're the ones who are going to be paying it obviously in Queensland as well as in New South Wales.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So there's a bit of work to be done there. But really, the structuring of how they buy the future purchases is probably one way to mitigate the risk, I would suggest.
Yeah. The other question I was going to ask as well is, because I've been through the state government website as well, and it's a bit ambiguous as to when this starts, but you already covered it early in the video. This is starting now, isn't it?
It's in effect now.
Yeah.
Yes, as of the 1st of July 2022. Or I should say midnight on the 30th of June 2022. It's in effect now.
Yeah. So the other thing I suppose people will want, and that my clients have been asking as well, is how do we calculate this ourselves? And so we'll be providing a link with the video to a basic calculator, because again, I checked the state government website and it's hard to work out on there how this is actually calculated, and there's different scales and graphs of what category you'll be in with this tax rate.
Yes, and I think you're right there. I think the Office of State Revenue Land Tax Calculator is something that has to be updated, and obviously it will be such that we'll need to include those interstate holdings to do that calculation as well as going to the interstate land tax calculators to add on what you'd be paying in the respective state that you have a further property in as well. So you're correct. It's going to be a technical calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's in some regards we both regard it as a tax grab, and the question has to be asked: if Queensland can do it, why can't the other states do it? And maybe they will. Anyway.
Yeah, I think the other states are looking at Queensland to see how this goes.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's great to share some time with this afternoon, Andrew.
Definitely.
Yeah, and thanks for asking those questions, and hopefully we've given some good answers.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Murray.
Thank you.